Welcome to another lesson from Chapter 10 on linear regression. This one is again on the correlation coefficient, but it is merely a practice problem, not an actual lesson itself. So with this, you'll be wanting to pause your video from time to time, just like you would in a classroom to work problems by hand there. So first thing here, reading this question, you see that it's talking about life expectancies. Is there a relationship between that of men and women? And are the variables related? We are looking for the correlation coefficient. That's what we're looking for. We're not going to go through the full hypothesis testing that you see in the textbook. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, what is that value? What's it called? Its notation, remember, is R. And before we do these, finish out, I need you to enter in your data. That'll be the first thing you need to do. Enter that into your calculator. Now that you've entered into the calculator all that data points, all that data, let's identify the values that are needed for your formulas. The needed values. So write down, first of all, just the notation that you think you are needing for this part of the question, the needed values. The needed value concept that I'm discussing is you need to know the sum of x, the sum of the x's squared, the sum of the y's, and the sum of the y squares. So I was saying the values you need are the sum of the x's, the x squares, the y squares, the product of the x's and y's, and then the actual value for n. Now, using your calculators the way we discussed it in our very first video, locate those values and identify those. Okay, should have from your calculator picked up the values for the sum of x being 314.2, sum of the x's squared 17,164.88, sum of the y's 331.9, the y squares 19,244.67, the sum of the xy's 18,171.89, and the value of n is 6. If you did not get those values, pause the video and check your data again before moving on. Now remember, we are looking for the R value, the correlation coefficient. The first thing now that you need to do is to identify the formula itself. You've got the notation, now it's the formula. Now if you've had time, you should have written that formula down. That is n times the sum of your product x's and y's minus the sum of the x's times the sum of the y's, all of that over that square root, that long square root. N times the sum of the x's squared minus the sum of the x's quantity squared, close those brackets, times another bracket, n sum of y squared minus the sum of the y's quantity squared. And That's the formula that you'll be using. So make sure that you remember that and how to get that one. Next, go ahead and insert that data. That data is for n, it is 6 and times the 18,171.89 minus my 314.2 times 331.9 as the numerator. The denominator, again, that long square root. N is 6. The sum of my x's squared, 17164.88 minus the sum of the x's, 314.2 squared, close brackets, times, now let's insert the y values, 6 times sum of the y squares, 19244.67 minus my 331.9 squared. Before continuing, remember, I don't need to see, don't calculate this by hand. Just find the value from your calculator. We discussed how to do that, how to find that on the calculator video. So you should be able to look that up and find out that value. 0.997. 0.997. Remember the things that you're going to be graded on. Check mark 1, correct notation. Check mark 2, correct formula. Check mark 3, substitution. Check mark 4, the correct answer. So there's a problem you've had a chance to practice on. Email me if you have any questions, remember.